Marine Captain Brian Latendry died earlier this month in an explosion in Iraq. He was 27, a husband and father, and he was buried in Arlington National Cemetery, a few miles from where he grew up. As America observes Memorial Day,
I am directed by the President of the United States and the Commandant of the Marine Corps to inform you that today, 0530, your son was killed in action while in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Not very many of us can accomplish our goals or our dreams, and he always knew where he wanted to go, and he did it.
A Gold Star family is one who has lost a loved one serving in the United States military. It's a distinction no family ever seeks, a bond shared through sacrifice, remembrance, and profound loss. I'm Nick Latendry, and I've been a Gold Star sibling for over 18 years. In those 18 years, I've learned that while ceremonies fade, medals are stored away, and life continues, the story doesn't end for the families left behind. This podcast is dedicated to remembering those who gave everything for their country and to telling the lesser-known stories, the quiet, powerful journeys of grief, strength, resilience, and hope that follows after the flags are folded and the crowds disperse. These are Gold Star Stories. Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of Gold Star Stories. I feel like these stories are something that a lot of people don't fully understand the weight of because, we see a lot of the ceremony and all that kind of stuff, the public-facing things. And what we want to talk about here is the silent stories of the survivors and exactly what they went through, because there's some absolutely phenomenal stories. There's some absolutely heartbreaking stories and everything in between. And when we focus so much on honoring the fallen, which, don't get me wrong, we are absolutely honoring them, we lose the ability for the survivors to tell their side of the story. And that's what I want to create space for here today, is for the survivors to tell their journey through this process of grief and some of the stories they've come upon and some of the just mind-boggling, like, how did people think that was okay to do type stuff. And today we are speaking to Jennifer Faulkner, who is the wife of Airman First Class Michael Faulkner, and she is friends with Kim, who we spoke to recently on our last one. So I'm excited to speak to Jennifer today and get some of her insight on the process. Jennifer, thank you so much for agreeing to speak with me on such short notice. I think I spoke to you for the first time like 45 minutes or an hour ago, and
Yes.
you were like, "Let's do this. I'm ready." So let's go into this. It's tell me a little bit about Michael.
Michael was a prankster, a jokester, laughing all the time. He was a diehard North Carolina Tar Heel fan, basketball fan, football fan. He loved what was then the Redskins. So we used to have football nights on Monday night where he would get the girls and we would dance in the living room to Hank Williams Jr. To set off Monday Night Football. He was the most traditional person I've ever met. Like, every holiday had its own tradition, and he was sure to make it sure that we had everything for that tradition that we did every year. Every Christmas, he was the Griswold of the family. You could see our house from like a mile away. Thanksgiving, it was a whole spread, and it was a whole thing where we went around the table and gave our thanks, and it was, every moment that we had, he made special. So his lifelong dream was to be a pilot. Ever since he was a young boy, he always wanted to be in the Air Force, and his inspiration for that was the movie Top Gun, which I think inspired a lot of people, but he took it very seriously and very much to heart. He wanted to fly, and he wanted to fly jet planes and fighter jets. He ended up with C-130s, which is a little bit different, but the cargo planes, but he still was able to accomplish his goal. So.
That's really awesome, though, to be able to be a pilot in general. That's a huge accomplishment. So tell me a little bit about, I guess, his passing and how all of that came about for you.
Michael had parts of his past that were traumatic for him, and he was not a person to talk about his feelings And it was very difficult when we were married that I would try to talk to him and then he would just leave. He would just get out and he would just go. He would get in his car and he would leave. He could not get himself to the point where he talked. He was non-confrontational about things. So there was a lot of things that were buried in his past trauma from childhood. And I think when he went into service, when he was in boot camp, they basically take the onion of yourself and they peel all layers until they get this very, very basic core self. And then they take that core self and then they build it to what they want it to be. And that's what happened with Michael. They broke him down just like they did everyone else there, and they built him back up to what they wanted him to be and what they needed him to be for his service. I don't think that they understand when you do that to the human psyche, when you break those layers down, that you expose every bit of trauma that's in there. So he had a lot of childhood trauma that came up and that came out that he did not know how to deal with, that he had spent his life suppressing. And once he was broken down and his mind was broken down, he did not know how to deal with the trauma that he had. So he had PTSD before he went into service. So, and I think just part of the process of boot camp and learning how to be this person and then this mold that they have for you, that process started an avalanche of mental distress for him. So he did have issues, like I said, with trauma, and he didn't know how to deal with it. He didn't understand who to talk to, and he was very prideful. So he did resist the temptation to, make appointments with psychologists or people to talk to, counselors to get these emotions out. He did make an appointment with the VA to speak to someone about it, but it was a long, exhausting process, and he didn't make it to his VA appointment. He actually passed away, and he wasn't on base, so his commanding officers didn't know that he had even passed away for 2 weeks. And they marked him as a no-show for training. So, so they marked him like AWOL. And in fact, he had been deceased. So all of his military records show that he wasn't active duty because he didn't report to duty, but he didn't report to duty because he wasn't alive. So that was really a kick in the teeth when we found out that, I tried to get his medical records and I tried to get information because he does have 2 beautiful children. And I wanted to know if, something was, like I said, he didn't talk about things very much that were very personal. I wanted to see if there was something in his medical file that would maybe explain why he took his own life. I still haven't seen those files. The VA says that Pope Air Force Base has them, and Pope Air Force Base, that is now Pope Army Base, says that they sent all of those to Virginia. So both of them claim that they're not there, and I've had caseworkers work on it to try to find his medical files, and nobody can find anything. So it's been just one thing after another. It seems like that's just been like a kick in the gut. But Michael passed away after he was battling depression and what I believe was bipolar disorder. He felt like that we would be better off without him. He got tangled up in an old group of friends that he used to hang out with that drank and were into a nightlife scene that Michael was just not that just wasn't him. It was very out of character for him. He was a great dad who stayed at home and spent every moment he could with his kids. And the next thing I know, he's drinking and driving, and he's doing these outlandish things that was just not in his character.
So he
He
was
spiraled.
was he was deployed then when this happened?
No, he
Or
was he was he was on reserve at
he was
this
on
time.
reserve? Okay, gotcha.
Yes. So he was reporting to base, and then he would come back to our town or general vicinity of our town, and then he would report back to base. So he was back and forth
Got it.
during this time. So he had started a relationship with a young girl who was, I believe, 18 at the time, and he was 37. And you will hear this as a very common denominator when they start to mask their pain and they start to spiral. They're reaching out for whatever will make them forget how they're feeling at that moment, whether it be a woman or whether it be alcohol or whether it be drugs or, you name your poison, whatever it may be. They reach out for that to numb that feeling and those feelings of losing control. So he actually hung himself in a hotel room, um, and they didn't find him until the night after. So he had been there for a while.
That's as far as how you found out, how were you informed of this?
Um, the first inkling that I had that I knew something was wrong was the young girl that he was seeing messaged me on social media and said, "Have you talked to Detective Johnson?" And I said, "Detective Johnson? I'm not sure what you're talking about." And as soon as that message came through, my phone rang. And at that time, my heart sank to my feet. I felt like I was going to pass out. My knees buckled. I answered the call, and it was a detective who had found him at the hotel. And first thing she asked me was, "Are you home alone?" And I said, "No, I'm here with my children. We have a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old, and they just went to bed. It was a Sunday night, and just to prep for school the next day, they went to bed early." And she says, "I need to come see you." And I said, "I need you to tell me what's going on." You know, this was 30 minutes away. And I was like, I need to know what's happening. What is he okay? I'm thinking he got caught drinking and driving. He's in jail. I need to go get him out. I need to post bond, one of those things. And she said, "No, I just really need to talk to you." I said, "Please just tell me if he's okay." And she said, "He's not okay." And I'm thinking, okay, he's in the hospital. Where do I need to go? What do I need to do? I was thinking in my mind, planning, I've got to call my sister to come get my kids. I need to get in the car. I have to do this and do that. And I have to grab my wallet. And don't forget this and don't forget that. And then she said, "I'm so sorry to tell you he's not with us any longer." And I think the blood just poured out of my face. I felt like my soul had just left my body, and I felt my knees buckle. And I said, this can't be true. This has got to be a really terrible joke. This can't be happening. He can't be gone. The jokester, the one that's always kidding, the one that is always laughing and is the life of the party. This can't be my Michael. It just can't be. This can't be real. And the next thing I thought after I felt those feelings was, "Oh my God, uh, what am I going to tell the girls? What do I say? What do you say to a 7-year-old, an 11-year-old, that their daddy's not here anymore, that he's not coming back?" And broke. It broke me. And that was a defining moment in my life where now everything is before Michael died and after Michael died. Everything in my life is defined by that moment. And it's a day that we never forget. It's a day that changed my life, their life, his family's life, my family's life, his friends' lives. It changed hundreds of lives. That day when he made that decision that he couldn't be here any longer. So I called my sister, who thankfully only lived maybe a quarter of a mile down the road. And she came over, and I don't even remember what I told her. I just remember screaming, Michael died. Michael died. He's not here anymore. And she came, and I remember knocking on my door, and I said, I've got to get the kids up. I've got to wake up the kids. So I went to wake up the kids, and remember they're 7 and 11. And I went to wake up the kids, and I had them lay in my bed with me, and they're like, Mommy, why are you crying? Why are you crying? What's wrong? And it's like, I've got to tell you something really bad news. I've got to tell you something really bad, and I don't want to tell you. Daddy was making some bad choices, and he made a bad choice, and it ended up he's not here with us anymore. And the look on my daughter's face was just pure devastation. I thought my heart was broken 20 minutes before, but it was nothing compared to how my heart broke for my children. And my 7-year-old says, Mommy, it's fine. He'll be back. He's not gone. He'll be right back. And I said, she didn't understand. I mean, how do you make a 7-year-old understand one of the hardest things for adults to understand? I just remember that night, like I just was in disbelief. And my aunt and my cousin, which I have a really close knit family with them, that came to my house, and they stayed all night with me, and my kids went with my sister because I needed to tell his family. So I was able to get his mom on the phone. I was able to he had a son that was my stepson that was from a previous relationship. I was able to get in touch with his wife and tell him what happened, and just being the person that told everyone else that he's gone, it just seemed like every time it just hit me all over again. So, I was able to get them on the phone. They came in and spent some time with me the next day, and I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I could function. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know why it happened. I didn't feel like it was real. Everything in my life changed. Everything.
How did the community react to all of this going down? Did you feel like you had support within your general community, or I mean, there's a lot of weird responses that come from all of this. Obviously, there's people that immediately step in, and they're almost, some people can be a little overwhelming, obviously, and a little too controlling. And then you have the people that, the community that wants to, I guess, be able to just support you guys. Did you feel supported? Did you feel ignored? How were your feelings in that moment?
At first it was an overwhelming feeling. People reached out, mostly people close to me that were close to me before. I was with an amazing group of people that I attended a church with that were just amazing. both pastors were at my door the next morning, comforting me and consoling me and praying with me and, saying they'll do whatever I need. Just let them know what I need and what we need. And that was wonderful to have that. And they stepped in and, helped with the funeral services, which, I wanted to be special for him and I wanted the girls to plan what they wanted to do. I wanted it to be a way that they would have closure. So they were amazing to be able to help us in that way. And that meant a lot. Um, I felt very betrayed by the military, by the people that he worked with every day, the people that he served with. I Nobody showed up. A casualty officer didn't come. We didn't have anybody from service show up.
You
And
guys were
I'm
just
not sure.
totally left to fend for yourselves.
Yeah.
That is absolutely unbelievable. It's absolutely tragic. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that. You'd think that is the bare minimum for something like this. For you know, it's hard to make other people that maybe have not gone through service or gone through this loss to, fully understand that whether this was a necessarily service related, death or not, their life is the military, right? And these people are with them all the time. To let it go 2 weeks, essentially without him showing up and them just saying he just wasn't active, that is absurd to me. Is it this because he was not active? Is that why they did not send you a Keiko? That's absurd. So it's literally like a paperwork error that just totally fucked you. That is unreal. And this is part of why we want to tell these stories, because the weight that you've had to carry by yourself is immense. I got goosebumps thinking about it. I'm so sorry. That is unreal. When speaking to Kim yesterday, she brought up TAPS as well. I'm assuming TAPS was your changing point too, as it was for me, meeting other people
It
that were
was.
like me and realizing I wasn't crazy, and being able to laugh about, not necessarily this, but just with people that were, similarly grieving. My sense of humor now is so dark, but it's great. I'm one of the funniest people in the room. So
Kim and I have the same sense of humor now.
but tell me a little bit about how you found TAPS and why you got involved with them and your journey with kind of finding yourself after all of this, because that is so all consuming.
Michael and I had a couple of friends that we would hang out with, and she was a widow. She was actually 9 months pregnant when her husband died by a bomb that exploded in his tank in Afghanistan. So she had mentioned the foundation of TAPS to me before, and I never really understood it. And once she heard about Michael, she said, "You really need to call TAPS." And I said, "I don't know if I'm any kind of frame of mind." She said, "Even if you just cry on the phone with them, there'll be someone there 24 hours a day that will sit with you, and so you don't feel alone." So I picked up the phone and I called the 1-800 number, and someone picked up and it's 3 in the morning. I'm like, no way. I'm like, and everybody else is asleep and, ready to start their week. And here I am on the phone at 3 in the morning, and I'm screaming and I'm yelling and I'm confused and I'm broken and I'm hurt and I'm lost. And there's this other human on the other side of the phone who's her name's Susan. I'll never forget her. We're still friends to this day. And she said, "I understand." She said, "I just lost my husband about a year and a half ago to the same situation." And just having that person say, "I get it. Me too," um, validated all the feelings that I was feeling. And from that moment on, I knew that I wanted to be a part of TAPS. And they sent both of my little girls a little stuffed animal that's a horse. And there was a story that went along with it that I read to the girls about how, their daddy was so brave that he signed the papers to give his life for our country and that his service meant something. And I finally felt like I could say something to them to make them proud of their dad. And from that moment on, every holiday, every celebration, every milestone, we celebrate him in a way. We find a way to honor his legacy and honor who he is and never forget him. So I went to my first TAPS meeting. He passed away June 8th. I went to my first TAPS meeting in October and I met Kimberly there. And we have been soul sisters. We have our own little group of Kim and Jen's. There was a little hurdle of us, and we have stuck together for the last 11 years.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and we get together once a year. I was just actually with Kim back in February, March, the beginning of March, and got to spend some time with her in Florida. Her kids and my kids grew up together. My kids had other kids that were going through the same thing that understood. So they would call each other and say, I don't know how to feel about this, or today I'm having a really bad day, or, I'm really angry right now. I'm pissed off, because why was I not good enough for him to stay? Why wouldn't he stay for me? What did I do or what did I not do? And they had people to talk to that felt the same feelings. And I'm just going to be really frank and honest. TAPS saved my life. They really did. I was to a point where I didn't know how to survive. I didn't know how to live. I didn't know how to bring two children with such grief and trauma up in their lives. I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know where to start. What was the beginning and what was the end? Where was the middle? I didn't know where I was. I was lost, completely lost. So thank God for Bonnie Carroll.
I will sing her praises forever. She's one of the most genuine people I've met. Just from the get-go, you just kind of automatically, you're just like immediately drawn to Bonnie Carroll. She's got one of those personalities. So she's wonderful. And I didn't get to find TAPS until I think it was like 3 years after all of it. I kind of knew about it, but because I was the sibling, it was more so, this isn't for me. This is for everybody else. Meanwhile, the rest of my family just decided they weren't going to participate in it. So by the time I finally found it, I was like, oh my God, there's people that are just like us. And I was like, guys, you got to go do this too. And everybody was like, no, we're not going to do that. And I wish they would have, because I really feel like, it would have helped them much quicker through the process. I mean, the grieving process is different for so many people, and it can get so incredibly dark at times, especially when you don't have the support system of people that understand it with you. Because you get to a certain point where people are like, it's probably about time for you to be over it by now. And then for me, I'm pushing 19 years since my brother died. I still am not over it. I still cry when I think about him. You know what I mean? It still feels like the freshest wound I've ever had. And people are like, well, he was just your brother. He was my big brother. You know what I mean? He was 9 years older than me. And I'd modeled everything after him. He was my role model. He was my superhero, so it's absolutely devastating. And I'm at the point now where I'm halfway, I'm at the halfway point in my life. I was 18 when he died. And we're coming up on 19 years. So I've literally lived more than half of my life, without him. And that's with me having that gold star distinction. And I got to the point where I don't even necessarily like to advertise it to people anymore, because I don't like to get friends just based on the fact that I'm a gold star. I want you to know who I am at this point, because I kind of lost my identity along the way. And I
That's
think
very common.
I think that happens with a lot of people. You feel the obligations to, you got to go to the ceremonies, you got to pay respect, you got to do this. And if you don't do it, then you're the bad person. How could you not respect him? Like, well, he's not here anymore. I am. I'm the one that's going through this, and I'm the one that needs support. And people kind of, I think at a certain point, just kind of fade off of that unless they've gone through it. They don't understand the continued support. And I'm not asking people to coddle me all the time. That's certainly not the case. But help me not forget. Let me not be the only one that's trying to keep memories alive here. So another thing that we notice a lot is that the relationships with friends and family change. Have you feel like you've lost anybody through this journey? I mean, some people, I know that we've had friends or family that it just becomes almost too overwhelming for them, so they just back off. Do you feel like that's happened for you?
Absolutely. I think that they didn't know what to say or when to say it or how to say it, so they just didn't say anything, which was probably the most painful response that could have happened. Um, I felt like people avoided us because they didn't want to discuss the topic of suicide. Suicide is meant to not be talked about. You don't talk about it. You don't acknowledge it. You don't tell people about it. You make up stories to cover it up. And we are very real people, and we didn't want to mask what happened to him. We wanted people to be aware that this happens, and it happened to us. It can happen to you. We never thought in a million years it would happen to us. And, here we are. I think one of the most painful things is my daughter was in middle school, my oldest daughter. Her school counselor told her that she couldn't talk about her dad at school because if she mentioned the word suicide, then the other children there would want to go kill themselves.
For real?
For real.
That is the most absurd thing I've ever heard.
It's disgusting. I
It is
pulled both
absolutely
of my
disgusting.
children out of school. I left my career and I enrolled them in a private school, and I started teaching at that school. And I'm not a teacher by trade. I have a college degree, but teaching wasn't my forte. But I wanted to be there with my children, and I wanted them to be around people who understood and knew the trauma that they were going through, and knew the heartbreak. And I wanted to be close by. They were both having episodes of panic attacks and just, and just brokenheartedness. And they would have moments when they would just randomly cry, and they would like, I don't know why I'm crying. My heart just hurts. And, as a mom, I want to fix it. I want to go in, and I just want to scoop them up and say, everything's going to be fine. And, we're going to be great, and it's going to be okay. And I couldn't console them in that way because I didn't know what was going to happen in the future. All that I could tell them was that I would be there to the best of my ability. I would be there. So for 7 years, I stayed in the school system where they went to school, and they weren't too happy that I was their teacher sometimes, but um, it was a honor to be there with them, and I think that's what they needed, so that's what they got.
Did you ever have a conversation with the person at the school that had given that rule to them, or did you just pull them and just say that's it?
No, I had a conversation with her, and I said, for someone that's in the uh, field of mental health, that's probably one of the most idiotic and crazy things that I've ever heard. And obviously, you don't understand what it's like to have someone in your family feel um, like they're an outcast for the actions that someone else did, something that was completely out of her control. She's just a child. She needed nurturing and love, and she needed her friends to give her a hug and say, I'm here for you. And she wasn't allowed that. And I thought it was just disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, it just totally takes away a portion of healing that is completely necessary, and that was so unnecessary. I probably would have burned it down.
It took a lot for me
I
not
can
to.
imagine. I can only imagine how, I mean, you're already feeling all these feelings, and then, your one thing that you were protecting now is your children. That's your number one priority, and then somebody goes and takes that away from them, which is such a simple thing, just to be able to talk. Um, wow, that's a lot of why I want to talk about this stuff, because it's these stories like this that we kind of usually hide to ourselves, right? Where it's just like this somebody in power that didn't have any idea about what's going on is making decisions and then doesn't want to listen to reason. Um, absolutely.
People are so uneducated about grief and suicide and processes and how people grieve differently and what's really needed when a family unit is going through such a traumatic loss. They aren't educated on that. And sometimes I think, well, I mean, do they have to go through it to understand it? Because sometimes I think maybe people don't get it because they don't know, because they've never felt that way. And I cling to people that have been through the process because I know in their heart how compassionate they are to people, because they know that feeling of despair and a feeling like you have to just dig your way out every day. And every day is a fight to survive. Every morning you have to make a decision. Am I going to try to live my life to the best of my ability, or am I going to stay stuck and just turn in circles all day? And what can I do to clear my mind today to be able to focus? What can I do to make this a better day for my children? What can I do to reach out to other people that are going through this? What can I do to make a difference?
So now how many years has it been since?
In 2 months, it'll be 11 years.
11 years. So we're going on 11 years now, and I'm sure it still feels just as fresh for you as it ever did. How do you define yourself now? What is your role in this? Do you still feel like you're just as active in outreach, or have you moved on to other hobbies and stuff, or what does life look like for you 11 years on?
I feel like the first 2 years I was on autopilot, to be honest. I felt like I was surviving, barely surviving. After that 2 year period, it was the third year where everything really hit me, the reality. I mean, I knew he wasn't coming back, and I knew what had happened in the previous 2 years. It was the third year that the fog started to clear, and it hit me really hard. The reality hit me really hard. So I knew at that time I had to do some soul searching, and I had to find myself. I went through a lot of, I was Michael's wife for so long. I'm the girl's mom. I'm the sister. I'm the daughter. I wanted to know who Jennifer was, not just Miss Faulkner. Um, I needed to define me, what were my life goals before it was being in a family and being a wife and being a mom. Did I still have goals? Did I still want to do something for me? Did I still want to push forward and try to make a different life? What direction was I going to go in? And I felt compelled to find who that was. And again, TAPS was a great resource for me. Um, I was able to get on a special program out in Arizona and speak to some of the top officials in the Air Force to do suicide prevention and awareness. So I was able to tape a documentary with them in Arizona, which TAPS made possible, and was able to speak to people that are transitioning out of the military and let them know what it's like to be on the other side when you make that choice, and how you take your pain and you distribute it to everyone that loves you. And even though Michael felt like we were going to be better off without him, that couldn't have been farther from the truth. Um, so even my daughters participated in it to give their perspective from what it's like to be a child and know that your dad's not coming back and that he's gone, and how painful it is to walk through life every day wishing that he's here. So we've spent a good portion of the last 11 years, besides the first couple of years, advocating and raising awareness and meeting with other widows and families and kids that have gone through the same thing. And that has been the best therapy that we could have had.
It's what's crazy to me is that they don't want us talking about, suicide or anything like that. But how are we to prevent it if we can't tell the stories about exactly what it does, right? We can't tell the impact of the children. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, a lot of these guys, I think if they can, wrap their head around the idea of the full impact on the family, unit, maybe it could open up and save one person's life, just the ability to talk about it and be like, hey, look at what it would do to your children if this is to happen. Nobody's better off without you. But I even notice on TikTok, on YouTube, all of them, I'm trying to upload videos, especially with I had that amazing conversation with Kim yesterday. And I'm like, okay, well, I've got to edit out these words or else it's going to be completely restricted and nobody's
Yeah.
going to get to see it.
And that's so sad. Why can't we just be honest?
Exactly. And I
I
wish
mean,
I wish there was a way I could be like, "Hey, so I'm actually trying to, do some mental health, awareness stuff. Could you guys give me some free passes?" But unfortunately, social media doesn't work like that. But it is important, and I'm glad that you were able to come on here and talk about it because even if it's just, one person that happened to come across this and can hear, your story, your daughter's, what they've gone through, and it gives them pause for a moment to get help. That's what it's all about. We've recently made friends with somebody who works the front line of the VA. She's a psychiatrist, I believe. She's the last line of defense, and we made friends with her on accident. My daughter actually became best friends with her daughter. So we were like, hey, why don't you come over and hang out with us Friday night? And she told me what she did for a living, and I'm like, the connection that like we come across with these things by talking out loud about it is just unreal. But she's got, she's going to have wonderful perspectives for me. I was like, I'm going to pick your brain so incredibly hard because for me on the Gold Star side, I don't know much about the suicide side of it. But I've come across a lot of families. I've dealt with a lot of siblings that have gone through it. So I understand the importance of talking about it. So hopefully we'll be able to get her to give me some more insights on this, and maybe I can bring her on to actually talk a little more in depth about it, to try to get some help for other people that are going through it. The fact that nobody likes talking about mental health, that's how I grew up. I grew up and it was, we don't talk about feelings, we don't talk about mental health, and then here I am on a podcast just spilling my feelings to everybody. Um, I feel like that's a way for me to be, open, but also to show other people they can be empathetic too, be vulnerable, and it doesn't hurt. You can't find your crowd, you can't find your community unless you speak your truths, and
absolutely right.
that's what this is all about, is helping others realize that even if 19, 20 years later or more, you can still be feeling this way and you can still find your crowd. And whether you're a sibling, you're a spouse, you're a child, we all have that same connection. It doesn't matter what your, category falls into. We've all dealt with a tremendous loss that we weren't expecting. And we've had to navigate it in a way that nobody taught us to navigate it. And oftentimes we've had to navigate it without the proper assistance because either we weren't active, duty at the time, or we're a sibling and that's not something that is, covered under, the grand scheme of help. So thank you again for sharing everything with me today. Is there anything else that you?
I will say that when you're grieving, everyone grieves differently, and just have patience with people. Um, when I first met Kim, she had this sense of humor, and I was like, whoa, I'm from the South, and we don't talk about stuff like that, or we don't joke about this or joke about like that. And I'm like, you know what, Jennifer, just you need to just go with the flow. And we've become the best of friends, and I have rallied my tribe, and those are my support people that get me. And I feel like I'm more at home with them than I am anyone else. So, and all of us have been through this journey together. So find your people and cling to your people. They will be a saving grace. Also, my faith has been a huge part of getting up every morning and pushing and getting my kids on the right path. And it's not hard to raise two teenage girls. I mean, it's very hard to raise two teenage girls by yourself, but um, I've learned so much from the other moms and the other widows on, kind of what they went through. And Kim's kids are a little older. So I'm like, okay, Kim, what did you do when Branson did this? Or what did you do when, you know, Sandra did this, and, she's always there to lend an ear, and just being able to go see them and hug them. And they're my family. They're my family, 100% my family. The other bit of advice that I would say is find a purpose. Take your pain and turn it into a purpose. Um, my children have very intentionally honored their dad in every aspect. Every birthday, every holiday, we relive the traditions that he loved so much, and so we keep his memory alive, and we keep his spirit alive with us. So to us, he's still here in our hearts and in our spirits, and that's so important, is to make sure that that big part of you still lives on. And we call it, his legacy. They are his living legacy. So my oldest daughter has decided to work with children that have been traumatized, and she just graduated from college with a degree in child psychology.
Fantastic.
So she's going to take what she has been dealt with, trauma in her life, and she's going to turn it around and use it to help other people. My youngest daughter wants to be a radiologist or a physical therapist, and maybe one day she'll work with wounded veterans. And so you can always turn something tragic into something beautiful for other people. It's just how you redirect your life and what direction you go.
It is a weird thing to say, but there is a beauty in grief once you get to a certain point, and you can see, the emotions that come from, I guess, maybe the creations of grief. I did a band for a while. The intro of the podcast is kind of one of the songs that we did, and I got to the point where I stepped away from it because people were like, I feel like you're just doing this you're just using your brother to get attention. And I got to the point where I was like, I'm so tired of hearing it. I'm so tired of, it became my identity that I felt like I couldn't really perform anymore without that. And I couldn't necessarily break away from it. I tried to break away from it at one point and do something different, but it wasn't the same. People are like, oh, well, why don't you bring back that other one? It's like, I can't win. You know what I mean? So I was just like, I'm going to walk away and just do my own thing. I'm finally back. My kids play music. So we're going to be hitting it hard. And I've stopped caring about what other people say about me. And that's really what it comes down to is, being able to have that outlet and just not caring about what other people say, because they have not been through what I've been through.
Exactly. And they don't get it.
They do not get it
and I
at
hope
all.
that they never do.
You're right. You're right. I don't wish it upon anybody. It is absolutely tragic. And for, going on 19 years now, I've thought about it every single day since it has happened. There's not a moment that has gone by where I can't just vividly recall some of these experiences that nobody should have ever had to, necessarily witness, the ceremonies, all that kind of stuff. So thank you for understanding, Jennifer. And the next time that you go visit Kim, I expect both of you to come visit me, because I'm not far away from her.
Oh, okay.
I'll buy y'all a drink.
Okay.
And I'll make my kids play some music for you.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I would love that. I'm
Uh,
glad you found music as therapy, and please don't ever stop playing. And that brings joy to you and comfort, and you feel like that you're doing it to honor your brother. Don't let anybody stop you.
nope, nope. I'm back on the track again, and with the kids on it, there's no stopping now because they're like, Dad, come on, let's go.
Awesome.
But Jennifer, it was great speaking to you. And when we end this here, just wait for a second for it to finish uploading. And again, I hope that we can meet in person at some point and
Yes, I would love
reconnect.
to meet your family.
Awesome.
That'd be
Thank
great.
you so much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Gold Star Stories. Jennifer's strength, vulnerability, and honesty are a powerful reminder that the cost of service doesn't end with a folded flag. It lives on in the families, the mothers, fathers, children, and spouses who wake up every day and keep going, even when the world forgets. If you've experienced a similar loss, know this: you are not alone. Your story matters, your grief is valid, and there is a community here waiting to walk with you. If Jennifer's words touched you, we ask that you share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, not for numbers, but for connection, for healing, and for legacy. And now, as we close, we honor the life of the man whose story brought us here today. To Airman First Class Charles Michael Faulkner, a dreamer, a prankster, a father, a pilot. He served his country, but it was the love he gave his family that truly defined him. And to Jennifer, who has carried the weight of two lives, who turned pain into purpose and heartbreak into healing. And to his daughters, who carry his traditions, his laughter, and his love into everything they do. You didn't choose this kind of sacrifice, but you've lived it with grace and fierce resilience. May his story not end in silence. May his name still be spoken with pride. Say their name. Airman First Class, Charles Michael Faulkner.